Welcome back to another episode of the Ritchie Brothers Insight series. And on this episode, we're going to focus on the components of a excavator in the chassis section. The chassis section is going to consist of the boom, the stick, the pins, the coupler, stick to boom, stick to coupler, turntable, hydraulic swivel, swing motor. We're going to look at all those components. They will be in the section of the chassis of your excavator. So we're going to start off with the boom. We all know that the boom is the main piece from the machine, connects to the car body. What do we look for on this, the boom, as far as wear? The main thing to look for is cracks or weld plating. In the checklist, you'll have a check box for both of those, weld repair or cracks. Not always, but most of the time the crack will be in this area of the boom. That's where a lot of the stress is connected to the car body itself. We'll get up there in a second and get some closer angles of where the boom may be cracked. May find some examples. Just look for cracks and damage to the boom. That's where your component, your main damage will be on your boom. The second piece in the chassis section will be your stick. The sticks can come in different lengths, and we're going to require you to do a stick measurement, and we can focus on that in another series. The stick can also have wear. It can have cracks or damage here. You'll see plating here a lot of times on a high-hour machine or machine been in a rock quarry or a rough surface application. But just look for plating here. Look for cracks up here. Sometimes you may have to lower the boom a little bit to the ground. Sometimes it may be wise to stretch the boom all the way out and lower your bucket to the ground. You can see this a lot better. But that's what the stick. And looking down the stick, take you good photos of both sides of the stick. So show the buyer the stick's in good shape. Step back, take some good long angles of the boom. Same thing with the boom, same thing with the stick. So we can have a good idea. And do both sides. It's highly important because sometimes you may miss damage on one side that's not on the side that you're focusing on. Be sure to look at both sides of a boom for wear, plating, cracks, anywhere that may look like it's an imperfection from factory. You want to make sure the buyer, because it's highly important we capture that. That's probably one of the bigger things. The undercarriage and also the boom condition, stick condition is something we really need to focus on the excavator. The next thing we'll jump to is boom, the base pins. I see a lot of this in checklists and reports. When the inspector takes the picture of the boom to base to pins, they take this photo. This is the sticks, this is the boom cylinder to base, not boom to base. Don't confuse those two. So here, we can get up there and get a lot closer view, but that is your boom pin to base. Make sure you look for wear. It's gonna be very difficult. The way you're gonna test that the easiest is being in the cab with the machine running. Sit your bucket flat on the ground. Like one of the machines behind us, you'll see how the bucket's sitting over here. And if you'll sit in the cab and have the machine facing like this, all the way like that, you can look through your window on your right and you can see that wear when you touch that boom. That's how you look for that. That's the easiest and the most effective way to check for boom wear, boom to base pin wear, is from the cab. So while you're doing your four corner shots, your operational videos, just take a glance out your right side of the machine, look at that boom to base. You'll be able to see that the best. We'll move on to where the boom and stick come together. That's another wear area. And just think about this moves every time this machine functions. So there's a lot of wear. There's a lot of movement in this pin. And this is the pin we're talking about. This is boom to stick pin. Look for this wear. You'll see, wear, air through movement, a light through here. Looking at this wear is highly important. You can also be in the cab, same way that you had your boom in a 90-degree angle. If you just do your swing a little to the left, you can see that wear. But take this photo right here. This shows how much wear is on the boom to stick pin. All right, and as we follow along in the checklist, we've touched on the boom, we've touched on the stick, we've touched on where the boom and stick come together. We've touched on where the boom and house comes together, or the base pin. Now we'll focus on where the stick connects to the coupler, or in your checklist, you also have an option where stick to bucket. So please do not get those two confused. I've seen in reports a lot of times where we have a photo of stick to coupler, and we've also right behind the next line item down would be stick to bucket. And we can't have both on a machine. So we can only have one. So please make sure that we get that correct. The one item that you don't have, if you have like this machine, you have a coupler and not straight stick to the bucket, you'll want to NA that one line item out. So you'd want to hit the NA button on the checklist. This would be on a full inspection. This would not apply to the live cell, DEI type inspection or photos in basic. But these are also photos you want to capture in a photos in basic. Everything we've talked about today is something that the buyer will want to see, even though this is a photos in basic or a live cell item. So let's go back to stick to coupler. So this is the photo that we would take. This is the pin that connects the coupler to the stick. And these two, if you have stick to coupler or stick to bucket, we would want to look for the same amount of wear. So you would want to look for wear here, and you would also want to look for wear in this side-to-side wear and also up and down movement. This is a very expensive repair for a customer. If he had to line bore this item, it would take a lot of money to get this repaired. So we need to make sure that we get this correct. And as you're in the cab checking your boom to base pin, your stick to boom pin, you would also want to look for loose movement up and down and maybe left and right. But make sure we capture that. And this would also require a couple of photos. One to satisfy your line item and also some additional, because you'd want to capture both sides. So today, on this machine, we have a coupler. So focus on getting this wear and also this wear in here. But don't get those two confused, because you can't have both, stick to bucket and stick to coupler. Because sometimes we have labeled this as stick to coupler. This would be your H-link or dog bone. But it's also important to capture the wear on those pins also. So just also look for wear where those pin connections to your H-links and your dog bone. As I mentioned on the other machine, you would have stick to coupler or stick to bucket. So this example is stick to bucket. Same thing we want to focus on the wear would be the exact same way. In the same places, you would look for movement in the pin. You would probably want to look where the pin is going through, not on the bolt side, but the opposite side. You can see wear, loose motion up and down, and also the same with left and right motion. It's the same theory as on the stick to coupler, but this is straight stick to bucket. Just do not confuse those two, and don't have a line item photo of both, because you can't have both. Same thing on, like I mentioned earlier, do not mix up the H-link and dog bones with stick to coupler. But these pin wear is as important as this wear. Still very expensive to replace. So just focus on that wear. Look for shims in here. Shims or the O-ring might be broken. A lot of excess grease hanging out, coming out of the machine. Just look for wear here. This is very, very important that we capture this. So as we'll move on down the checklist, we've covered all the boom, pin, and connections for the boom. In another episode or series in this series, we'll focus on boom types, because it asks in the checklist different types of booms. This would be a standard boom on the machine we're using today as our example, but we can focus on that in other series. So now we'll move on to the turntable bearing. The turntable bearing is also a very expensive component, and it's highly important that we make sure we look for wear in here. So how do we check for wear? That's a good question. I'm glad somebody out there is asking that. I know everybody's scratching their head right now thinking, man, how do you check the turntable bearing? There's no way to move that. For me, I don't know. There's probably more than one way to do it, not to say my way is correct. But as you're sitting in the cab with the machine running, I would recommend sticking the boom all the way out and putting your bucket with the bottom flat and raise it up a little bit off the ground, about 2 foot, and just lower it quickly. And if there's movement in this bearing, you won't be able to see it because you'll be in the cab operating the machine. But if you can feel this loose motion, because this bearing will actually rock on itself. So this two-piece bearing will actually move. So as you're in the cab and you lower the bucket down quickly, you'll be able to feel that movement. But it's highly important. So you would want to look for The grease seal, there's a grease seal in here that contains the grease. Because it's grease, you can see these auto lube lines here. Not all machines will have this auto lube line. They would be grease fittings here. But you just want to make sure that grease seal is not hanging out. Look for excess grease sticking out of the, hanging out of the bearing. That's a sign of wear. But this is highly important that we make sure we capture this, because that's a very, very expensive component. If a customer were to see that it has a lot of wear, they would probably choose to look at other machines in the auction. The next line item is bottom covers. We can stand here, we can look down the bottom of the machine, we can go to the back and look at the machine and make sure the covers are on there, not damaged. Because what you'll see is operators swinging over piles of rock and dirt and tearing the bottom covers off. But it's just important that we capture that. That's all the line items in the chassis section of an excavator. One thing that we did not touch on was swing tower pivot. That would be in your checklist on this machine. So this is a machine that does not have a swing tower pivot. Do not get this confused with a swing tower pivot. Do not get this confused with a swing tower pivot. I've seen that in the past. The swing tower pivot would be on your mini excavators, your smaller machines, and that's something we'll focus on in another series. But do not get those confused. We skipped over that one line item on this checklist. But in that section, you would just want to NA that out, because we do not have that. It's not applicable to this machine. But that's all the components in the chassis section of an excavator.